actual meeting, just to visit. Could everybody make sure their phones are turned off on vibrate? Being 5:38, I'm going to call the meeting to order. The Town Lake Placid Town Council, the local planning agency, Regional Utility Advisory Commission, Community Redevelopment Agency as a joint workshop agenda. Thursday, November 13th, 2025, 5:38. Please stand for the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance by our town administrator.
Please bow your heads. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come together to serve your people. We thank you, Lord, that we can call upon you and that your word says that where two or more are gathered, that you're in our midst. So we know that you're here and we welcome your presence. We ask you, Lord, to give us wisdom and discernment as we have the conversations that will determine the growth of the town of Lake Placid. Not only the town of Lake Placid, but even the greater Lake Placid area, where everybody lives and calls Lake Placid home. So we ask you, Father, to go before us. Let our conversations be seasoned with your grace. And Lord, let us be able to look to the future, because we know that your word says that without vision, the people will perish. So we give you all glory, honor, and praise. And we thank you in advance for what you're doing here and what you're doing in the whole region. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming and participating in this workshop. So I would go ahead and ask the clerk to do roll call for the Town Council and Community Redevelopment Agency.
I was going to go through and just name them and do them all. Just do all boards at the same time, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
So we'll do the roll call for the Town Council, Community Redevelopment Agency, the Local Planning Agency Board, and the Regional Utility Advisory Commission.
Mayor Holbrook, Councilmember Hayes.
Here.
Councilmember Worley.
Yes.
Councilmember Charles. Councilmember Eberhardt.
Here.
CRA Board Member Frank Hartzell. Board Member, CRA Board Members Ken LeBlanc. On the LPA, Chairman Dustin Woods. Jack Edgemon. Donald Clarke. Here. Dr. Oxer. Gary Freeman. Chris Duncan. Here. Alex Ramos. Utility Board, Matt Elliott. Jon Draper. Here. Tal Rancourt. Pam Brewer. Here. Jack Conley. Here.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over. Of course, the Central Florida Regional Planning Council is going to be the main center of this discussion, but I'm going to turn it over to our town administrator to make those introductions.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Worley. So the workshop was called together so that we could have all of our boards come and discuss the challenges and the growth for the town of Lake Placid. Due to sunshine rules and laws, we were unable to allow them to be able to discuss it in any other setting, so this made a perfect setting, and we would like to have all of the minds that be to be able to come together and to discuss what our plan and path forward is. So we would want to hear from the public. Jennifer, I believe as we go through, we'll allow opportunity in between for them to have public comment. We will keep that limited to 3 minutes as time give or take allows, just because we want to be able to allow the board to be able to have good dialogue and discussion. So we'll see how that falls as we go through the process, but there will be an opportunity for the public to be able to speak. And I'll turn it over to Miss Jennifer and her team. Jennifer with the Central Florida Regional Planning Council. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you all for coming together this evening. We really did want to have a conversation tonight, as Charlotte said, on that path forward. I did want to introduce our staff who will be facilitating the discussion tonight. That includes Jeff Schmucker, our planning director, and Mary Beth Soderstrom, who's our transportation director, and then Brenda Torres, who oversees planning as well and community engagement, is one of our planners. So thank you for the opportunity. And I think that's my cue to turn it over to Mary Beth, but we'll see. This is very high tech. Thank you. Is that it? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So I have the pleasure of helping facilitate this conversation today, and in order to do that, we're going to have a few different tools that kind of help us stay on track, because we only have not that much time tonight and a lot of things that we could talk about. And so over here is my chart paper, or as the image on the screen is a parking lot. So anytime we get to an idea or something that maybe would require a lot more discussion, maybe it's entirely own workshop, or we need more resources or information to be able to really discuss that in a kind of educated way, then we're going to put it on the parking lot. And so we promise we might not get back to it tonight, but we will get back to it on the whole. And so every time we ask, like, hey, could we put that on the parking lot? Brenda's going to add that to our chart paper so that we can keep moving. The other thing that we're going to do is use Poll Everywhere. So there's the code where you can use your phone and take a picture to get to the questions. You could also use your browser on your phone to go to pollev.com, and then it's /HL2060. You can also text HL2060 to 22333. So we really primarily want to get our board members in these conversations, but of course anybody's welcome to join us. And it'll just help us prompt conversation and see where the pulse of the group is. So to start, the very first question, and I'm going to have to switch it over in just a second to open it up, but what is one thing you love about Lake Placid that you never want to lose? So what is it about Lake Placid that is that one thing that is the most important to you that should never change or lose? And now, hopefully, see, I'm going to be technology challenged today, so. All right, and while those continue to load, you can continue to think about it. I'll leave this question open. But I am going to turn it over to Jennifer to kind of get us started with our conversation.
Okay, that's my cue. So every workshop has a little bit of ice breaking, so hopefully we broke some ice on the technology feature there. And will I get to show the slides, or we'll leave that up?
We'll get there.
Okay, we'll get there. All right, so tonight we really wanted to have kind of an overall kind of Google Earth view. And when I think of, a lot of details and then kind of rising above that and looking at the bigger picture. So as we look at the town and we look at the future, of course we have the core of the town, and then we have the greater area in unincorporated Highlands County. So we'd like to talk about both tonight and get your feedback as you look at what's coming forward. And also as part of that discussion, we're working in partnership with the town and the community to look at the downtown area as well and come through to a downtown master plan. And as we look at that, just some quick facts. The town is almost 5 square miles in area. And as we look at our population, we're about 2,419 people, according to the statistics that are currently available. And as we look to the future population, we're looking at actually growing, and again, these are projections, about 600 people to almost 3,000 people by the year 2050. So as we talk about growth and we look at not only future growth, but we look at infill development in downtown, for example, and then so much kind of the core area of the town that is undeveloped yet, we really look at planning, and that allows us to look at preserving and providing orderly growth, looking at our neighborhood and business character, and preserving that and enhancing that, and also what comes with that, infrastructure, making sure that we have adequate ways to get places, whether it's by road or sidewalks or multi-use paths, and then also providing consistency. So if I want to look at making an improvement to my home or business, knowing I can go to the requirements of the town and know that those are predictable and that I can move forward. And then really, as we look at not only providing for our current population and future population, so much of what we talk about is how do we pay for that? And I'll figure out by the end of the meeting which way to point the clicker. There we go. So this is kind of a view of when we talk about visioning and looking at that, but really it's true. We start out with that blank piece of paper, and we start hearing it seeds and looking at the future of what will be. And then as we put that to paper, we actually then start that unified direction. And a lot of times what happens is we're looking at that direction. I know sometimes even in our own office, as we look at the path forward, Mary Beth will say it's transportation or nothing. And Jeff will say, no, it's this land use or nothing. But it's that compromise in bringing that together for a balance. And so much of Lake Placid is unique and really, truly beautiful. So I'm adding some subjectivity to this presentation, but I've had the great opportunity to work with the town over the years. And when I first came, it was just amazing. The caladiums, the murals, and everything that y'all just said, that small town charm, it's all here. So as we kind of look up a little bit, kind of at that aerial view, again, we're almost 5 square miles, and when you look at that image there, you'll see the core. You can see the roadway network and where we've had a lot of development over the years. And then if you look to the west, we actually do have a lot of potential in the town yet itself. So as we look at where we're growing and how we're growing, back in the year 2020, we had about 2,360 people, and that was the 2020 census. And then in 2025, today, about 2,419 people, and again, looking to the future. Now, these are projections for the town itself, about 2,918. And that all depends on development and how much is coming. But these are projections that are provided by the state at this time. And as we look at our population by age, our greatest age group is between the ages of 18 and 64. And then secondly is 65 and over. And then kind of our smallest group is under 18. And then as we look at educational attainment, we have folks who are high school graduates at almost 28%, and then with a bachelor's degree or higher, about 24%, and then higher level education of at least 25%. And then as we look at the types of housing that we have, the majority of our housing is single family detached, but then we also have multifamily as well. And we have a little under 3% of mobile homes. But that just kind of shows the housing stock that we have in the town. And then as we look at household income, the majority of the population is over the 50,000 mark. The median household income, and again, this is U.S. Census, American Community Survey, the median household income is about 45,000. And then when we talk about transportation, how folks are getting around and getting to work, the majority is about almost 70% driving alone, but 12% carpool. And then we have folks who can actually walk, and then about 11% who telecommute or work from home. The average travel time for folks who live in the town to work is about 32 minutes. Does that sound about right? How long does it take you to get to downtown Sebring? 20? 30 minutes? Yeah. When you're in a hurry, it's even longer, so yeah, or it feels like longer. So tonight, as we talk about the future, and in each of the boards that you represent, you're faced with really addressing folks, and it's really about my home, my business, and my community or my town. But when we look at my home, when folks come in, if you already have a home, sometimes you are putting a fence up or putting in a shed or a pool. And those regulations that we have in place tell you where, how far from the front property line, how far from another structure. And then when we talk about a business, we talk about, is parking required, signage, any outdoor display. And then when we talk about the town itself or the community, overall looking at the administration of that, and also looking at enforcement as well. So as an example of my home, which probably the local planning agency, as you may review new subdivisions or variances, a lot of what you look at is what's required in the land development regulations and placement. And then a big part of that is, as we're looking at new development, looking at compatibility and making sure that exactly that. And that actually happened somewhere. where you have two uses that may not be compatible or transition to one another. And the code addresses that along with buffering and separation. And this is another example, something that really your comprehensive plan and land development code work to prevent. With regard to businesses, probably all of the boards have seen these site plans many times, but again, addressing where you're going to put parking, where you're going to put stormwater to make sure that we're catching the water and treating it before it's discharged, and connectivity as well. And a lot of that also goes with where does it go? So if we're proposing, for example, a new planning office, where can we put that? And we look to the comprehensive plan and the code to look at what zoning we fit in and what level of approval do we need. And then with regard to the town, it's really looking at administering those requirements, reviewing the applications, and going through the process, but also enforcement. If I built my fence, but I didn't ask anyone, and I put it on Jeff's property line, probably somebody is going to have to come and cite me and tell me to move my fence. But just a lot of the examples of the realm that you work in, whether it's development, existing development with expansion or infill. And then do we have a question? So that takes us to our next polling question. And what you see on the screen is through the visioning that we've done as we talked about the downtown with the community. These are a lot of the key words that have risen to the top as we look to the future of the town. And is this one of the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going. So that being said, as we look at the roles and responsibilities, we are grateful that the local planning agency has come tonight, the Lake Placid Regional Utilities Advisory Commission, the Community Redevelopment Agency, town staff, and town council. But the Planning and Zoning Board, or the local planning agency, and the Utilities Commission, they're advisory, and you provide your recommendations to town council. And ultimately, those policy decisions and anything in the comprehensive plan that requires additional feedback, these boards make recommendations to the town council for their final decision. And we're back to continuing to break the ice on technology.
And I think we have like competing mouses, so we're all over the place. But so there will be a series of questions that are really just to get us started thinking about where we are now and where we're headed. And so for this first one, when it comes to serving residents, Lake Placid is strong and improving, strong but weakening, a weakness but improving, or a weakness and declining. So you have to pick one of those four, and then if there's any comments, or if the councils would like, or the boards would like to talk a little bit about what the results are, we can do that. All right, we've got 4 responses so far. I'm going to switch to the responses screen. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so far, here's what we're seeing. So when it comes to serving residents, Lake Placid is a weakness but improving, and we have a few that have a weakness and declining. We still have some more coming in, so you'll see those numbers change. I'm going to kind of scan around and see. So do you want to ask a question or two?
I was just going to jump in. So
Perfect.
again, Jeff Schmucker. We're going to just kind of jump around a little bit with our presentation, but is there anyone that wants to share their thoughts on that? Part of the reason for the polling questions is really to kind of get that engagement to figure out what are some of those thoughts. I mean, it's great to get a poll and say, you know, we have a weakness, but we're improving, but is there anyone that wants to share as part of their experience why maybe they chose that selection? Or if you want to stay anonymous, that's absolutely fine as well. Go ahead, Pam. Okay.
Unfortunately, I put a weakness in declining as my response. I think there is a great need for better communication, rehaul of the Lake Placid Regional Plan and the LDRs. I want businesses to have, small businesses, more opportunities, new businesses that want to develop on vacant lots, expedited zoning permit that shouldn't take 4 or 5 years to go through the process. I want economic stability, economic diversity. I want higher paying wages, and I think we're missing out on that.
Any other thoughts on that?
Is there anyone who put a weakness but improving? What do you see as the improving side of that equation?
I guess I'll speak up. I'm seeing more businesses, coming to the Main Street or Main Avenue and Clear Lake area. So I'm seeing more opportunities for residents to do more shopping. I started a small business here 3 years ago with bringing in a bicycle store, which most people are telling me now after 3 years and we're expanding, told me they never thought it would make it. So there is a need for small businesses, even some that people don't think will make it. But I'm seeing more and more businesses, coming to the area and wanting to come to the area. The hard part is in both Main and Clear Lake areas, it's very interspersed with office space and things that just aren't retail. Clear Lake kind of got killed with that happening. We had a great retail area years ago, and then you started getting more of the offices and doctors' offices, attorneys, so on and so forth, which there's a need for all of that, but it kills the retail area. Now we're starting to see some of that stuff on that. I just now finished an expansion of doubling my space by taking over where the title agency was next to me. I was able to acquire that, break out the wall, expand my display area. So we're seeing some expansion there. I also created a small incubator space within that another small business can have their own storefront, their own display area to help them. And that's kind of what we need. And that's what I see as things improving is more businesses that are going to bring people in and bring in dollars to the city.
And so a perfect segue is actually when it comes to supporting our businesses, Lake Placid is. So we kind of narrow in a little bit. We heard from 2 different folks about kind of their perspective with our businesses and how we support them. All right, and as we're seeing these results come in, kind of similar, and they're going to jump around a little bit. Strong on the weakness side, but also really strong on the improving side. I am looking around the room because I'm going to start calling board members, unless anybody wants to jump in. Anyone from maybe the CRA board would like to talk a little bit about this? Anyone?
I can't answer, I'm not going to talk to that, but later on, if somebody would willingly say how we're declining so we can fix it.
I'm sorry?
For whoever said a weakness and declining, if they can tell us what declined so we can fix it.
Okay, so there is an interest to know a little bit more about the declining side of things. And we might not have any speakers. So, and again, sometimes, polling is just a helpful tool, especially to give voice to people who don't necessarily want to speak up in a big group. And I think we take all of these numbers just to kind of get a general pulse of where we are. And I think it'll help inform, again, as we continue to discuss and go more into vision. So with that, I think if we could switch back over and get back into roles and responsibility in the boards is probably where we are.
There we go. Okay, well, let me just wrap up what Jennifer was discussing on the roles and responsibilities. With all the boards and, your planning and zoning board, your utility board, right? The town council as well. Does everyone know their roles? Is everyone comfortable with their roles? Do you know what your role is here to fulfill as your stewardship towards the town? I think part of the conversation, and we're going to get into a minute, we're going to look at some maps and talk about land use and zoning and where things go, a lot of those things that Jennifer had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, but how each and every one of you fall into this bigger piece of the puzzle. And I think it's important, aside from, where things go and how things come about, what those roles are and how you contribute to those. And I think Pam might have made the point earlier, communication. I mean, the communication of things, right? As a planning and zoning board member, your role is a recommending body. So when things come before you, you have a role to review things as they come through, provide that recommendation to the town council for them to make that final decision on something. As part of our conversation, I'm not looking for any answers right now, but just want to try to open that conversation. This should be somewhat of an informal conversation as we go through this. But if there's any questions on roles, if there's any questions on, do we have the ability to do this? Do we have the opportunities to do this? Let's get those questions and see if we can get those answers out in the open. The idea here is to make sure that there's a comfort level amongst all the boards, amongst the town council. As this all comes together, it becomes a more well-oiled machine, if you will, to make these things, happen more fluidly. And especially for the business community as they're coming in. When a developer comes into your community, they want to have that, I heard the word earlier, they want to have that predictability. They want to know when they come to the table, okay, what am I expected, from this process? What am I expected to do? What am I expected to submit? When I go before a board, am I going to run into hurdles when I get there after I've submitted all of these things to now only be told, well, we don't like this, or, you haven't done this, or tell me where it says that in the code. We're trying to kind of vet out through this process, make sure everyone knows what those roles are in the boards that you sit on, but also making sure that is the comprehensive plan where it needs to be, is the land development code where it needs to be, to make sure that there's predictability in the process. I mean, that's a big part of being a good business-friendly community. So again, just as we go through this, if you all have questions about things, feel free to raise your hand and let's get into some conversation. And I'm going to try to learn this. There we go. So just briefly, the town really has a lot of tools in the toolbox, and this is just a small sample of those things. As I mentioned before, the city's comprehensive plan, I think everyone is familiar with what that is. That is your vision. And then your land development code, that's how you implement that vision. Those are both tools in your toolbox. Again, things that you can look towards to help guide the growth, guide the community, the my home, my business, my town, looking into the future. You also have a community redevelopment agency area in the core part of your town. We'll look real briefly at opportunity zones. There is an area of an opportunity zone, which I'll show you a map of in a moment, that does touch a portion of the town. And then, of course, the Lake Placid Regional Plan, and we'll get into that a little bit more too. and the regional utility as part of that. But the reason all of these things are so important, as you know, we're going through a downtown master plan update with the town, but that does not operate in a bubble. That is just one piece, but that operates as part of the bigger part of the town itself. And then the town itself operates as part of the bigger part of the picture being the Lake Placid Regional Plan and what's happening in the surrounding county as well. So all of these pieces have to come together, and we have to think about all of these things holistically. We can't think about them in a bubble. What's happening on the outskirts of Lake Placid as development occurs, those are probably generally folks that are going to probably be coming into the town for services, using your roads, using your utilities, using your services, all of those things. They enjoy the benefits of the town even though they're on the outskirts of the town. But the Lake Placid Regional Plan is part of that, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well. But all of these things need to be thought about holistically, and you do have a great series of tools in the toolbox already. Again, as Jennifer pointed out, town is about 5 square miles, but this is the future land use map of the town. I don't know if the pointer will actually, whoops, nope, it won't work on there. So I'm just going to go back. I think everyone is fairly familiar with the core part of the town there, but the land use is really what guides that. That is your vision. So understanding your vision of where development is to occur is really the first piece. And when we think about land use, we think about it at the umbrella, the foundational level. Residential over here, industrial over here. Your commercial corridors maybe down 27. It's that big picture. I don't know that we provided a zoning map, but the land development code would be the zoning map. So where your residential is, you might then have low-density single-family residential. You might have some medium-density multifamily development. Those are your zoning districts that then guide the development within these properties within and around the town. Again, as part of that is your roadway network. The map on the left up there shows the maintenance responsibilities. This is data from Highlands County, but it just gives you an idea also about infrastructure. When we think about connectivity, that's one thing physically. There's a cost associated with that as well, and there is an entity who's responsible for that cost to help operate that roadway, to help maintain that roadway. That is a big part of this. And when we think about land use, when we think about connectivity, when we think about roadways, infrastructure, utilities, we have to think about where these things locate, where these things develop. It's fine if it develops on the outskirt of the town, but if that requires now a new roadway to go out to it, new utilities to go out to it, and then all of that is dedicated back to the town, that becomes a cost to the town at some point too. So you have to think about these things in your roles when you're looking at development, when you're looking at connectivity. Who's responsible for what? Is this financially feasible for the community to have something like this come in? If you've got a development out on the outskirts, and we'll talk about the regional plan in a second, those requirements for it to connect to utilities, that's important, right? Because those are going to be utility connections for you. There's dollars associated with that. There's also costs associated with that too. So these are things that you have to think about when we think about development as it's coming in. Where is it coming in? We talk a lot about infill development. That core area of the city is the area of the city that has the most close proximity to your utility, has the most close proximity to the greatest connectivity of roadways. So when we hear these comments in workshops about more walkability and bikeability and those types of things, generally the best part of the town that could serve that would be in your core area of your town. So if we're trying to really meet those goals, meet those visions, how do we structure and try to find those developments to really serve those purposes? And you have a lot of that as potential infill in the core area of the town today. I had mentioned briefly the opportunity zones. The opportunity zones, this is a federal program. It is recognized by the state. It's that hatched area that you see that generally touches a portion of the southeast area of the corporate limits of the town, but a lot of the southeast area of the Lake Placid Regional Plan area and then beyond into the county. But essentially what that is an area for incentivized non-residential growth that could bring in industry, into the community. We're not going to get into the weeds on that, but we just wanted to highlight that you do have a federally recognized area that does touch a portion of the town, the Greater Lake Placid Regional Plan area, that has that opportunity to incentivize non-residential growth in the town, which can contribute to economic development, additional housing, appropriate housing in the right places. Okay, so do we want to take a poll? Well, let me ask you this. Does anyone have a question on any of the things that I'm discussing to this point in terms of roles, in terms of understanding the locations within the city, the town, the Greater Lake Placid area? We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
Can I ask a question about the opportunity zone? So the county has done a strategic visioning plan and completed that after a year. And August 2025, it went before the county commissioners and approved it. And it's on the Housing and Economic Development website, nice, report by a consultant. There is no opportunity zone listed for Lake Placid area. So I had a question of staff about that. I know the county's interactive website, Lake Placid
Yeah.
did, but when it comes to where can Lake Placid develop or have light industrial or have opportunity zones that you can get some special incentives, they do not list it.
Okay, Pam, we can.
A very small part of the corporate limits. It's really that bigger regional plan area, which we'll talk about in a minute. South Lake Placid, which is set up with mixed use and was really intended for industrial and business park type of uses. But you're right, it's a tiny part of the town. It's a much bigger part of
Right, well, I'm not even in the Lake Placid regional plan area. They had nothing for the greater Lake Placid area would be considered opportunity zone.
We'll check on that. This is federally designated. There's a state coordinated years ago on. I think Brenda's keeping notes on the names for us.
If I could,
Yes, go
okay,
ahead. Ms.
there's,
Worley.
we have a lot of conservation land around Lake Placid, and it takes up a lot of acreage. And it may be outlined here, but I think that you almost have to, it's state-owned and it's state-preserved, and it will be forever. There are large corridors for our large animals to move around, so we're almost like, they're trying to create corridors, so they're around us. So you have to include those with whatever you're doing, because those will never be developed.
Right, and those would be recognized. So as voluntary property owners come to the table to put their lands into conservation or management, right? Another way to think about that too is development in the Lake Placid Regional Plan area as well. My understanding is, anything that comes in that area would come through as a planned unit development, right? Opportunities to address things just like that, in addition to the housing, the infrastructure and everything else that comes with that. But that is certainly another point of part of the design as we think about development when it comes in those conservation corridors as well.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's do another question. Can we do another question, and hopefully this one will move smoothly, and let's all jump to our phones real quick and see if we'll get some conversation going. This one is really with regard to safety, and it could be when we think of violent crime, criminal safety, if we're thinking about I'm just crossing the street from a physical aspect of my safety concerns when my son is walking to school, there's not enough lighting in the community. However you think about safety in general, this kind of covers the whole gamut of that. And is there anyone that wants to share as they're going through? So strong and improving. Does everyone feel that Lake Placid is a safe community to live in? Yes.
I believe it's a safe community. Yep, it is. It's a safe community. Well, with the paper sale, I don't see, except for very rare occurrences of house fights. Are about breaking downings. That's some of the times people in cars unlocked, and people, kids coming by, the adults showing change, and guns out of cars and kind of things. But no answer on that stuff. But that's my feeling. It's a pretty safe place to live out.
And would you say that that would be generally a sentiment of the community as well? I mean, when I think of Lake Placid, when I'm down here, I don't feel unsafe, when I'm moving around the community. How about from the standpoint of, walkability? Is there anyone that moves around the town by foot, by bicycle? How about crossing US 27 from the east side to the west side?
That's a little scary.
You gotta be quick. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see when they finish all the new improvements they're
Right.
doing. They're trying to make it safer, not just for cars, but for pedestrians. So I think that's kind of wait and see when we figure out when they finally finish all the new improvements. Because
Right.
all those improvements are supposed to be for safety. But I think one of our strong points in Lake Placid is that we look out for each other so that people know when they come into town that it'd be hard to get away with something without somebody intervening or helping somebody else, because it's a community that cares, and they're not going to stand by and let somebody, get damaged, I don't think, without intervening in some way.
Jeff, if I could, I know some of the feedback that we've received is that it's not lighted up. The lights downtown are not very friendly. It is something that we're working on, but that's been some of the complaints that we have had, is that the lighting. And then also our sidewalks. We've had some comments regarding the sidewalks and just the handicap accessibility for some of the heavier wheelchairs. That has been a discussion that has come up in some of the workshops, which was interesting for me. But just a few that have come to me as a town administrator.
And those are all really good points, right? So again, when we think about development, when something's coming in, I know one of the biggest struggles that we have with a lot of our communities is the developer comes in and says, you're telling me I got to put sidewalks in with this development? Well, you're putting in a new 200 unit subdivision, and you're along a certain roadway, and there's a commercial center, maybe a quarter mile up the road. And while there might not be sidewalks today that lead from that commercial center out to where their development is, we say, we'd like you to put sidewalks in. Well, those sidewalks lead to nowhere. Well, ultimately, they would lead to somewhere at some point. I think one of the biggest challenges we have when developers come to the table are some of these very simple things when we talk about you need to add the sidewalks. And a lot of them will say, well, show me where it says that in the code. Do I need to do that? Well, a lot of times it's there, sometimes it's not. And we'll point back to, well, it's a safety welfare concern, and it's part of the purpose and intent of the community to make sure that there's connectivity between where you live and the services that you have. The reason that's important is you all are challenged with that every time a developer comes to the table. Either it's planning staff, it could be your utility staff, your public works staff, whoever it is. If you don't get it then, and then you hear from the community, I don't have a way to get from my home to this service, whether it's an ADA accessible sidewalk, whatever it might be, how come we didn't get the developer to put that in? And as we all know, we're all financially constrained. No one's got the money. The town doesn't have the money to just go through and we're just going to start paving sidewalks everywhere we go. We have these opportunities when these folks come to the table to ask them to put these things in, to meet our goals, to meet the vision. I mean, these things are in the comprehensive plan. We have them outlined there. If there's things that we need to adjust in the land development code to strengthen that, to make that predictability better, that only strengthens the need for those things to go in, but also the reality of getting them to go in. But it makes everyone's life a whole lot easier too, and it it has a business aspect to it as well from a cost perspective, right? When we think about it later down the road as far as capital improvements and where we're going to focus our dollars. If we can get the developer to put that in, that's fantastic. But again, just kind of expanding on how these conversations, when we talk about these things, what is the reality of how the rubber meets the road for all of the staff, all of the boards when we're thinking about these things as development and growth is coming in? Yes, sir.
There's a moving target on these figures. The last one about is, Lake Placid safe, it's at 75% and then 25%, 90, then 10%, then 91%, 9%. What was the final answer on that? Safety.
We've got ambitious people that answer quickly, and then right at the last minute, somebody puts another answer in.
And we can go over maybe all of the numbers at the end if we're interested, but so 91% strong and improving for when it comes for safety for all, and 9% said strong but weakening. For the final, yeah, before I left.
In the downtown area at one time, as far as the walkability, and it was, I don't know the whole history of it. Basically, when you built a home, you had to put in a sidewalk. And I think in new developments, that's how they build sidewalks. When you build a home, you put in a sidewalk. Well, at some point, somebody complained about that. And if you look around town, you'll see there's a sidewalk and then in the middle of nowhere and then nothing.
And then
But
you have a gap.
exactly. But if if that plan had continued, we'd have sidewalks all over the downtown area. But it stopped, and I don't know that that's something we should maybe readdress. So if you do build in the downtown area where it's not a new development, which it is required, that we could maybe start that policy again so that that would be walkability. And it would be and basically it wouldn't be more for the homeowner to put in, but at the end of the day, it makes their property more valuable because you have walkability and their kids can play on the sidewalk. And I think it was a good plan, but it's kind of bizarre. If you look around, there's a sidewalk and then no sidewalk. And that's because it started and then it stopped. But that might be something that the town should revisit so that we would have sidewalks as new construction comes.
Yep, and especially with the new construction. So when you get those developments that might come in, like when we think of Journal Plaza or we think of some of these developments that might come into downtown, that requirement would be there. And now you're a homeowner that lives, maybe a block away and there's a gap or two in between there. Some of those connections might start to organically come together anyway because now they realize, wow, this is a connectivity opportunity. But when you don't have anywhere to go, it's kind of like the broken windows effect. If you see broken windows, you tend to then not care about it, and then you don't do anything about it. But as things start to grow and things do develop, and then those opportunities present themselves, sometimes some of those things might also start to happen organically as well. But that's a really good point, yep, and we'll look at that.
And that's kind of where I was going as well. We have certain areas that can be connected so easily to make great walkability for people. There's Heartland Boulevard down towards Tangerine. And you have that area there that was bought as development within the past few years. Is there any way to get that developer to put sidewalks in to make that connectivity? Because we see, people walking from, honestly, the other side of 27, they're able to walk sidewalks past the post office, down Heartland, to head to the ball fields, soccer ball, baseball, whatever. But they've got a large section of road that they can't walk down. And then they're also missing the opportunity for those people to take Tangerine to get to the schools. And you'd actually have a really nice walkable area. Even that one area was finished by the developer. And is there any way to reach out to the person that blocked that area and say, hey, we need to get these sidewalks put in before you start, putting in houses?
Can I ask something on that? Is that West Interlake and Tangerine and North Tangerine that you're talking about?
It's Heartland.
Yes, for Mr. Weymouth, he contacted me, and so we're having some discussions right now about that property and some sidewalks.
Yeah, and that would be a real benefit to change where the town has that property.
I'll share that with you so that you have that for
That's good. So,
potential.
so there's things in the works.
Yes.
Some of those conversations are very difficult to have, especially to try to retroactively go back and have those conversations. Well, you didn't tell me I had to do it before. Why do I have to do it now? And that's difficult. But you do have an opportunity when you draw a line in the sand, you say, from here forward, we're going to do this. But to that same point, when you are looking at your capital improvements plan and you're looking at expenditures for improvements to your roadway network, to your sidewalks, where you have clear areas where there is that established connectivity, but you've got some of those small gaps, that makes it easier to then say, well, let's prioritize, and it's not very expensive to put some dollars into that, because that will then serve a bigger need.
I have an answer for that, because this has been a very hot topic, because when you come down Heartland, you see the whole Lake June Valley. It is the most beautiful, if you ever want to come down, it's just beautiful. And people love to run and walk there. And then you come down and then it just stops. But our problem is that when there's a developer that was started developing and then the crash came, but there's not enough room that the town owns, that is government property, to put in the sidewalk. So that's the problem, and that is a real hot topic as far as people coming to me and very upset. Like, why don't you do, I said, well, we don't have enough room. So how do we crack that nut? Well, I think it could be cracked. We might have to go to the developer and say, if you donate this land now, maybe we could, something, but we don't have any space there to put in a sidewalk, so we have no ability to put one in at this moment. But it has been a very, very hot topic, because it's such a beautiful place to walk and run and even bike. It's gorgeous. So, I don't know, we could try to work on that, but we don't own the land.
Just for clarification, in your LPR, your LPRs, you require sidewalks, excessive, some would say, sidewalks and other things.
Yeah, and the developer was,
Path, so-and-so path, and this path. So, it's in there. And I think that's probably one of the problems where you don't see this development, because the density is 3 gross per acre, 2 net, and then the different requirements you have to develop for, like a Hilton Head type of community, and it doesn't cash flow.
So let me ask the question, and I'm just, because we're just having an informal conversation. We deal with this all the time, and we have regulations in the plans, and it says you will do this. And then you're coming in as a planned development, and you can negotiate, and the developer, tries to tell you, like I mentioned before, well, that sidewalk's going to go to nowhere.
no, we did negotiate that.
Yeah,
The
no, and
developer's
I'm not-
supposed to put it in,
yeah.
but the development didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, oh,
Sure. What I'm saying, though, is, it really becomes the enforcement of your code, too, and then following through with that. And it's making sure, and again, this comes back to the communication, too. It's in the plan. And if it should be in the plan, then keep it in the plan. If it's something that shouldn't be in the plan, then you go back and say, let's revisit this. But if it's there, and implement it and then enforce it, that's a lot of times easier said than done when the conversations start to happen, and staff will tell you that. But when everybody's on the same page, and that's what the expectation is, and developers come in, and that's what that expectation is, to put that improvement in, it's like a snowball, and it will continue to happen. But if it's not enforced and you don't do it, the next developer is going to come in and say, well, you didn't make him do it. Why am I doing it? It doesn't connect somewhere. So it's just an example. I'm not trying to point at any one particular area. And you're not dissimilar from a lot of other communities in the region. It's the same thing. We all have to have these conversations.
Can
Okay.
I add something really quick? Because Pam just touched on something. She said to look like a Hilton Head. I think that is something that we really have to think about and look at, because when you hone in on our population size and the salaries that our people are living on, the reality is that most of them are at a poverty or under poverty level. And so we're trying to develop a community that looks like It's very upscale, Martin County, St. Lucie County, you take your pick. But the reality is our tax base does not support that landscape. So how do we get there? If that's what you plan to keep, that's what we plan to have, how are you going to do that? And that's the true big question that we have to ask as the town of Lake Placid, because we want to have this, but we don't have the tax base to give that to this community. And that's the reality.
All right, I think I'm going to just kind of breeze over development review process. I think most folks are fairly familiar with this with the boards, right? Your comprehensive plan, again, is your vision. You have your code of ordinances and your land development code. And then where the rubber meets the road is essentially your engineering and design standards and your building codes, right? Any questions generally on development review process as things come before the town? Okay. All right, let's talk about the Lake Placid Regional Plan area when we think about the greater area of Lake Placid.
All right, so the first part of our conversation was really about the town itself, right? What is in the corporate limits and, what are we facing? And that's really where we're going to see the need for core infrastructure improvements where we have existing infrastructure that ages and needs to be replaced. And then still a lot of the core of the town that has not developed yet, and planning for that future as well, and bringing in utilities to serve that area while again servicing the existing area as well. The Lake Placid greater area is actually in the jurisdiction of Highlands County, but it is a very unique area where both the county and the town have really over time worked. It's really a joint planning area is what it's become. And a lot of jurisdictions really work to achieve this. You have development outside of corporate limits, but over time, eventually those areas will come into the local government. And one area outside of Highlands, but think of the city of Lakeland and the city of Auburndale, if you're familiar with those geographies. They're not too far apart, and Polk County's in the middle. And over time, Lakeland would say, okay, we're going to annex, we have an annexation agreement, but folks would come in and develop in the county, and then the city would inherit it, but it wasn't consistent with city codes at all. So then over time it was inconsistent, and the city may have had additional standards. So those communities adopted a joint planning area, so if it eventually got annexed into Lakeland or Auburndale, it would meet those jurisdiction standards coming in or be similar to that character. So this in Highlands is probably the only overall joint planning area, but we do have a lot of communities in the state that try to really achieve this for consistency over time. And this area really came about as we did see growth coming towards the center of the state and really wanting the community to plan its future rather than it being planned for it. And there's quite a bit of history to it, and I just wanted to kind of give an overview. But in this map, you'll see the gray area is the town. The greater area, or what's now called the Lake Placid Regional Plan, is anything with that bright color on it that you see on the map, and that's almost 34 square miles. And kind of one of the easier ways to explain this, if you think about development, if you develop in unincorporated Highlands County, for example, the image to the top has no design standards with it. The image on the bottom does. So just kind of looking at those two images, is there one that you all in the public too have a preference on?
Yes, the one we have now.
Which is the town. So without that joint planning area, that bigger area would not have any design requirements. So over time, you would see it develop with the top image rather than the bottom image. But that greater area is a joint planning area that carries requirements for aesthetic treatments. And we see this in communities, and a lot of communities want to reach this, but a lot of times you'll get the metal building, Dollar General or Family Dollar, not to pick on them, but if you don't have guidelines or requirements, they will put up the standard metal building. But they do actually have a palette for those communities that require the bottom picture. And they won't tell you that unless you bring it forward that that's your requirement or a guideline in your community. So that greater area in unincorporated Highlands County, that Lake Placid Regional Plan brings forward that requirement. And there actually is a lot of detail in there to help folks achieve that goal. But that's just one example. The other example, there were a lot of principles developed, and we'll go over the timeline in a minute. But really, as you think of new growth in other areas, communities that you go through, are there any areas that come to mind where you think, oh goodness, that's a lot of growth, and it looks like it's just kind of packed in, and you'll have neighborhoods, new neighborhoods where you'll be driving through, and then the road ends and there's a fence, but 5 feet from there is the next road, but you can't get there from here. And there's no landscaping on the road, no sidewalks, no paths. And we see that where we don't have additional requirements. So part of the Lake Placid Regional Plan, back when it came about, was the property owners and the community came together to look at that area. And similar to what you all have said, and some of you probably were here during that time, what do we love about the town? And as this area grows on our periphery, the folks said we want to maintain that character. So a lot of the character that you see in the town, the goal of the Lake Placid Regional Plan was to bring that forward to that greater area. But this is the timeline. It wasn't created overnight, but really the initiation of that started in 2005, and then by the end of the beginning of 2013, that joint planning area, it mirrors itself in the Highlands County Comprehensive Plan and the Lake Placid Comprehensive Plan. Why? Because at some point, some of those properties will come into the town as well. So there's that consistency. Did I lose anybody? So this is a better snapshot of the geography as we look at the plan itself. The north boundary is the Lake Francis area, and to the south is State Road 70, and there are some exclusions which you'll see on the map. And there's a lot more detail to the plan, but I wanted to hit the highlights tonight. So also as part of the plan, that includes, as we look at growth to the future, services, which includes water and wastewater, but the bigger planning picture. When we talk about safety, it includes emergency services, healthcare, all of those components that come with a new community. And really, over time, what will happen is that greater area will become a new community with its identity tied more to Lake Placid. And a lot of those folks, even if they're further out on annexation, will come to the town for services and recreation, and some of those developments will have their own recreation components. But the key to this is the Lake Placid Regional Utility and connecting to utilities as well. But these are some of the principles of what that regional plan was founded on. And when you mentioned the wildlife corridor, and when we talk about water quality and as we look forward to our quality of life and our viable future, these are all components and planning principles, not only general planning principles, but principles applied to the greater area. So this is a snapshot. That blue shading with the red outline is the Lake Placid Regional Utility Service Area. And then you'll see kind of those yellowish green areas. Those are other utility service providers. But the overall goal of the county and the town back in probably 2011, when the county went first and adopted the Lake Placid Regional Plan, was the provision of utilities as we see growth in this area by the Lake Placid Regional Utility. And that's how that kind of, there's more history to that. I'm giving you the high level version, but growth will be coming to this area. But as you see on that map, there are other utility providers. But really the key is utilities as we look at higher densities and intensities and growth in that area. So I'm going to stop there for a minute to see if there are questions. We see a lot of development across the state, and if y'all are familiar with some of your neighbors, they're starting to see more growth as well. And they actually look at the components of this type of joint planning area. But one example is South Hillsborough County, which is a little outside of our region, but they're pushing, right? They're pushing on Hardy, Manatee, DeSoto, all those areas are pushing. But it's this proactive time before it comes, because I'll say the people in South Hillsborough are like, what happened? Now that the development has come, a lot of it wasn't done with kind of these principles set forth in that master planning. It was more like, okay, you're allowed 5 units an acre, and these are your, whatever, 7,000 square foot lots, but not the requirement for a boulevard in, a multi-use path, the provision for new parks and recreation facilities, or if it was, it just wasn't like an overall master plan. In this area, whether it needs to be refined over time, everything does, right? But we have to start with something on a map. The overall intent of this was to have a community proactively looking at the future. So you'll hear more conversations about this area, but I know a lot of times when we're out in the public, it's very confusing. So is it in the town or the county, and what are the requirements? But the big thing is it's really your periphery, and at some point could be a part of the town, especially those closer areas in the near future, and helping guide what that will look like. But also, as part of the plans, which are also in the Highlands County Land Development Regulations and reflected in the town as well, a lot of that development will come in with a planned unit development, but there's very specific requirements. But as Jeff had mentioned, that is more of a flexible zoning. As you all know from your expertise and your experience, there's no property that is exactly the same. And there's nothing always, ever configured the same. But there are opportunities within that for better design, which the planned unit developments provide. But even without that, you can have specific guidelines. In respecting the Florida Wildlife Corridor, a lot of folks are like, oh no. Well, a lot of that follows some of our wetland corridors as well. So there can be win-wins, but those are some examples of planned unit developments, but also that design guideline and facet. So there's a lot of components and thought that go into this. So that's just kind of high level.
Can I make a comment on utilities? It's probably not the most famous conversation for us to have, but it's necessary that our utilities is an area that we definitely need to focus on and hone in more. I know our regional utility board is very familiar with that, and our utility director. But as you can see, there we have a lot of area to grow, and he said it perfect, Mr. Warner did, is that if you don't see it underground, you don't know whether it's aging or not. But we have a very old, aging infrastructure. He has been schooling me greatly on that we must focus on. And so when we're planning the development, this is a hot topic that we have to focus on. And Councilwoman Eberhardt knows that because she sits on the board as well. So I just want to hone in on that. We've already started meeting with some individuals individually, Eva and I have, to talk about annexations because we've been asked why we haven't annexed in specific areas. The county has come to us and we have a binder full of areas that we need to look at, but we're not just looking at annexing them in. We've got to be able to provide them with the services as well and the capacity for the town to be able to do that right now. And I will tell you, we're at capacity. There is no room for growth at this point. So we have to make some major changes, which is why we're thankful to be here. But to put it on your radar, if you have any questions, you want to meet with us one-on-one, Chris Duncan met with us and we reviewed some of this information, and we also have met with Ken LeBlanc. So just putting that out there for anybody who wants to see it one-on-one, we can have a further discussion.
So that's twofold. In the core of the town where utilities are close, really the town deciding what the priorities are. And it does, as you know really well, it does take a village. In a lot of other communities where we see this planning, it's more than just the local government, and it's more than one developer, but coming together through an overall developers agreement. And the area hasn't popped yet where you see that, but there are opportunities for that collaboration in utility extension for future growth, but it does take also private sector initiative as well, because the local government cannot do it itself, but it does take that initiative to bring lines further up, and you'll see that in some larger developments where there is that collaboration and partnership for that extension. Yes, it would. You have to go through a process and follow Florida statutes and do a study, but yes, local governments can institute impact fees. Yes, sir.
And if I could add one other thing is we have the Duke Site Readiness Plan that is another tool in our toolbox that we could leverage off of, that we're starting to have conversations with the Economic Development Council in Highlands County about.
I see people building homes there, and they're spending, let's say, $20,000 to put in a septic tank and tile field, right? And they don't know whether in 2, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we're going to get sewer hookup in there, I think the city and the utilities department needs to come up with a plan. I realize they don't have the money to do almost any of this right now, but a plan of where they're going to put in these sewers and approximately when. So a person who's building their own, private home could say, if I'm going to get a sewer hookup in 2 years, it doesn't make sense to spend $20,000. I'll either wait, maybe I'll wait to build, if I don't have to build right now. Or if it's going to be 15 or 20 years, then it's worth it for me to spend the $20,000 and, junk it in 20 years down the road. So I really think the city needs to, even though they don't have the money to put in these lines now, they should come up with a plan of where they're going to put them and in what sequence are they going to do it, and then try and come up with an estimate of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. Thank you.
So kind of reiterating that back to you, a utility master plan for water and wastewater specifically, and a phasing plan, because that's a good point. That's a significant investment. And if it's coming next year, like you said, you might hold off on building.
So the wastewater treatment plants to be coming online, I guess, not too long from now, just a couple months rather than a year. And the town has laid out the order in which they're going to at least be laying out these sewer lines on Canal and Lakeside.
Based off of the $40 million grant, is that what you're referring to, John? They have it, it's mapped out. I don't know if, Bert, you want to speak to that or not.
So basically, with some of that $40 million grant, they did some basic designs, but they've never really put anything forward, which way they want to go and how they're going to fund it. So we've discussed getting a master utility plan, but that's the cost of that and the time it takes to put together. It's an ongoing thing and a fairly costly amount. So we have been talking to some of our engineers in our library about putting something together like that. So like I said, we have partial plans or partial ideas, but funding-wise, time-wise, grants, yeah, okay. You know, with the way things are going, hopefully they'll help on some, but we have to find a way to, you know, do some self-funding here. You know, even if we do small sections of it at a time, so. And then grants can help us, you know, as a tool, but it can't be the main funding. Yes.
John, you're right. The council did identify more or less a schedule in the grant applications for the $40 million of where lines would go first in the septic to sewer conversion. So there's a lot of that has been started. Bert's right, needs to be fleshed out, and we've just got the starting part done.
And then balance with that the effectiveness of cleaning up old septic systems versus the length of line versus the water location, all those.
Yeah, right. We had looked at that when we had the $40 million grant, and the county was kind enough to say, go ahead, Lake Placid, you take the whole area. And that's what got Lake June Point residents fired up, and Jack, you remember that? That they got all fired up because they wouldn't know whether they wanted a grinder pump or another kind of pump, and this was going to be terrible, and it wasn't my septic tank that's impeding the lakes. And look, I was sitting here taking the arrows at that point, and you know it too. You were there.
I agree, yeah. And that's why I'm saying that I think we have to determine what areas around the lakes are contributing the most to the high nitrogen content in the lakes, right?
Right.
I looked at some, I think it was the University of Florida that does some studies. You know, they take samples every so often, a few times a year or whatever. And the ones that I happened to look at today indicated that Placid Lake and the Placid Lake canals there seem to have the highest concentration of nitrogen, right? And Lake June was significantly lower than that. I'm not saying it was perfect by any means, but it was lower. Those areas, those two areas flow into Lake June. So if they're high, and it's flowing into Lake June, and then Lake June flows north to wherever, you know, maybe it would be advisable to do those areas first. The canal areas in Placid Lakes, for example, they're relatively small lots, all right, which means the septic tank and tile fields are closer to the water, in that case canal, right, than they are in a lot of the homes around Lake June itself, right? I'm not really familiar with all the areas, but if you have older homes on smaller lots where the ground elevation of the lot itself is closer to the water level, it's maybe 4 feet above the water level or whatnot, I would think that those would be the areas that are contributing more to the problem. The other thing is, I've questioned several people on, does anybody take samples of the water and test for fecal coli or whatever, right? And it's pretty much no, they don't, Well, if you don't know whether there's fecal coli in there, you don't really know whether the contamination is coming from the septic tanks or is it coming from fertilizer runoff from the lots, right? Or a combination of both,
And it's the canals that are coming out, going down Catfish Creek, dumping in the lake too.
And Lake Watchers doesn't do that.
Right, so I mean, there is that regard. But
We never said that Lake Placid wasn't a problem. We just don't even want to be part of that $40 million grant. We were assigned making the recommendation to council where we thought the $40 million should go. But Placid Lakes didn't want to hear any part about that. They thought it was letting them off the hook for not using sewer. That's state mandated. We got to clean up the lakes. All y'all did was just not take a piece of the money for $40 million. That makes sense? It still needs to be done, but that's how to do it. So.
Right, well, there is no money right now, basically. We pretty much spent the 40, most of the 40 million. So we still need to decide which areas should we do first. I mean, we're going to be picking up Tomoka,
Well,
their treatment
things
plant.
you have to realize too is that maybe Placid Lakes is the key area, but do we have the money to take that, to pipe it from Placid Lakes into the new wastewater treatment plant? Or
Okay.
could we pipe it easier from someplace that was local, more close to the wastewater treatment plant, like Lake June Hills, and, something that is of somewhat of a pollution, problem, but at least we could be able to pipe that.
Well, I think too that they have their own utility out there, and we have 20 minutes left before we're going to end this meeting. So Bert, I think Mr. Harris has been standing up there. You have something to
Very
add, and
brief.
maybe we should move on to the next, wrap it up.
Very brief, if I may. I appreciate the point of master plan, but money drives the train, particularly when you're retrofitting old sewer septic tanks into a sewer. The most expensive thing you can do in utilities is retrofit sewer to septic to sewer. My opinion is this is going to be driven by our grants, just like the one the state paid to go out to the conference center. I think the state will continue to pay to go to these damaged areas, even if they're not on a master plan. And keep in mind, they're in the county in most cases here. The county has said, you take the lead, but we still need to go back to the county and say, you, county commission, apply for these 4 grants. We've got one lined up, we think still, from the federal government if the budget ever gets adopted. SRF is still a good, we've got options. We just need to apply, and the county needs to help us apply. Thank you.
Mr. Warner, I think Mr. Warner had a comment.
No, they can't. They can't. We clarified, and because they're not the utility owner, they cannot apply. They can't. We clarified that. And then the other comment I have to make for the whole of the good of the group is that grants are not a guarantee. If we are waiting for grants, we are going to wait forever. And Mr. Harris and I will argue on this one, so we're not going to do that publicly.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
going
we
to tell
will. You
you.
started it.
I know, but I'm just saying, I will win because I have written grants and I have worked grants, and I am telling you that if you are waiting on grants, this will not happen.
Well, it's happened before in
We're
this
not in that-
community, and
I understand, but-
I appreciate your point. If we're not the utility, if the county's not the utility owner, that may apply in some, but it doesn't apply in all. I too spoke to FDEP, and they said, "Oh yes, the county certainly can apply."
I think that we could have hours
We
of
will.
time
Yeah,
on
we
this
will, but-
meeting, but Mr. Warner, I think he's our utility director.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, you know, the easiest way for us to start, we have where the water lines are, which is Lake June Road. We use the water lines, water meters to monitor the wastewater for charges. So now if you're going down other areas, you're going to have to run water and sewer. So it's a larger cost. So if you start with infrastructure that's already in the ground, like mostly water main down that way, and then you add, you know, your sewer, that's your low-hanging fruit. And, you know, the master plan, that would probably be the first thing they'd tell you in the master plan too. You already have some infrastructure, add your sewer lines, get those connections, and then as you build your system and everything connects, then you branch off them. And where a lot of places have water but no sewer, you just keep building that. So, but like I said, you got to go with the infrastructure that you have and then add your sewer lines. You just can't add sewer lines because now you have no way to measure it. They do make meters, they're expensive, so you go on estimates. So to get your accurate and your funding correctly, you have to have a water line to go with it.
Yeah, maybe we need to have another workshop just on that. So
Yes,
thank you, let's
absolutely. I think
let our good people here, they got a long way home.
Oh, no. We definitely captured that, and I think, yes, utility master plan with a phasing plan is potentially very much one of the next recommended steps. If my friend in the back could switch us back over to the polling questions, we have one left, and we kind of want to bring this home by kind of going back to the big picture holistically. Let's see. Yeah, sorry, if you could jump all the way to, well, there we go, it should be 6. So, when it comes to quality of life, Lake Placid is, and our 4 options, strong and improving, strong but weakening, a weakness but improving, and a weakness and declining. And while you guys ponder that, and we can kind of jump around just a little bit, but I did want to review some of the things that came up today. So when we asked, what do you love? It is all about the hometown feel. It's our small businesses. It's our family environment, our friendly atmosphere, and that the people make the difference. When we talked about serving our businesses, for the most part, we're maybe not in a great place now, but 3/4 of this group said that we were improving. When it came to safety, we feel really strongly and positively about that. So 91% thought it was a strength and still improving. Walkability, about half of us said that it is a strength and improving, and the other half said it's a weakness, but it is improving. So either way, we're improving with that one. The one that we had some challenges with really is when it came to serving residents. So 2/3 of our group said that it is a weakness, but it's improving, but also 1/3 said it's a weakness and it's getting worse. So as we think about this quality of life question, what do we need to do to improve how we serve residents? What is it that would start to move that needle? Because that seems to be the one component of the things we've discussed where maybe we feel like we're not quite there yet. Any thoughts on how all of this comes together to serve our residents in our town?
We continue to get beat up about what is there in town for people to do, and what is there for the kids to do, and what is there for the people, the senior citizens, which are the majority basically of our population, to do. And now we don't even have a golf course, but it looks like we may have pickleball before we die, and we're going to have some playgrounds for the kids, but we have playgrounds that have to be, I think they're going to come under the CRA, and so Lake June Park is not going to come in that, but I think those are the things that we keep getting beat up on, at least I do.
Any other thoughts when it comes to how we kind of turn the tide on that one and get stronger? Okay, so our results so far. When it comes to quality of life, Lake Placid is. So 67%, majority of this group thinks it is strong and improving, which is obviously the direction we want to go, right? There's a few folks that maybe have some differing opinions on where we are, and it might be headed in the wrong direction or the right direction. Is there... Oh. Jeff wants to know what quality of life means. I think Jeff could explain what quality of life means. What does it mean to you?
Take pride in your community. I think you can depend on each other, and when you're uptown, people are friendly. You enjoy what you're seeing when you go uptown or when you're in Lake Placid. I personally think it's declining in that, citrus was king for generations on the citrus grower. We pushed our road. I think northern people, people used to love coming to Florida for the citrus, the trees, the orange blossom smell in a certain time of year. And now it's just a lot of push, dead, dying push growth. There are some new, growth being planted, but, around Lake June Point or Lake June Ballfield, that was all the roads. And pretty much it's not anymore. So is that aesthetically pleasing?
It's a bit of an identity.
It is an identity thing, and so things are changing, and Florida is growing, and Polk County is just, a lot of different coastal areas, it's too much development. Look up by Poplar, Claremont, or something, you go up to Gainesville, and you're like, where are all the people coming from? So how do you improve the quality of life here? I think you recognize that we are transitioning, and you can have it continuing to be more low-income poverty areas, and just vacant land, or is this a possibility that you can shrink the Lake Placid Regional Plan area, or that you talked about it, Berg, in that one of the goals of the Lake Placid Regional Plan was expedited permitting. It was supposed to be a quicker turnaround. You're supposed to get a bang for your buck. That is not happening, and you stated that, but that's one thing that definitely needs to be improved. My thing is, I think you can still hold a lot of the LPRP, LDRs, but you need the density to be able to pay for it. You need the infrastructure, utilities. If you at 3 gross units per acre, 2 net per acre, somebody can't pay 3 times as much to develop in Lake Placid than in Sebring or out of the town or in unincorporated Highlands County, Eberhardt Park. It's not going to cash flow. So if you want to continue to look at basically the way we are now, keep everything as it is. But if you want to change it, if you can say, well, Sebring, Eberhardt Park, other areas, they have density 16 to 20. They incentivize economic development, infill. If you want that, then how do we get there? How can we develop in our core downtown area? What do we do?
I think our density is more than 3.2, but let's lay that discussion aside. If we need to address density, that may be one of the things we need to tweak.
Yep.
I
that is
just wanted to
definitely
say
a
too
future
that I
conversation.
think, I hear that they love that people are kind and good here, that they're very nice, and they don't get that. And the other comment is our traffic. That they go to they're so refreshed coming here, and there's not horrible traffic. So those are the two things that I hear mostly.
And if I could make this comment, we know that Highlands County has primarily been a retirement community. That is the reality as well. But in Lake Placid, if you look at the median age, it's running about 45 years old. I put on here that we've been strong, but we're weakening, and that's been in my history of even just visiting the town of Lake Placid over the course of having my first daughter. It is a real concern because we want to not have growth because everybody is retiring to our community. And while we can appreciate that, the reality is if you don't have other people here to contribute to your tax base, then we will die. That is the reality. And so how can we appeal to all generations? But this is one of the first times, if you look, that the town of Lake Placid has had this age group that wants to be here. So how do we entertain that? How do we keep them here? Because now you're talking, it's your generation keeping them here in our location. And Pam has a good point again. Citrus, a lot of them stayed because they wanted to be in this, it's a family thing. It's carrying on that legacy of citrus, and even in the cattle industry, we're seeing it over from Okeechobee County. If we don't do this, you're not going to have people to stay because they're going to move away. So now you're losing your, I'm 45, my daughter is 30, and then I have 3 others that are here, and I have grandchildren that are here. The reality is if we don't do something, they're going to leave. So then you will have no tax base to even maintain the town of Lake Placid, and you're going to just go under the county. We will. That's what will happen. And that's the truth. That's the reality. So I think it's something really to think about.
Something to think about. I don't have an answer. I don't have one way or the other. But that was like, we like the small town feel. But we need people to maintain taxes. And then there's talk about high density, but high density I don't think is typically high real estate taxes. Whereas spread out, you have the people coming from the coast with the incomes and the high real estate taxes. So it's a dichotomy of which way do we go, or maybe combine the two.
Right. Get a good balance.
So perhaps do we have maybe some sort of conversation or, I don't know, a study, but something on revenue and just how the town sees revenue moving forward? What does it look like now? What are the projections? And then maybe what are some options? So it's interesting. We have not all of the information yet. Actually, the survey's still up on the town website because we were in the middle of the downtown plan at the same time. And so I just pulled the results of where we are right now for this survey. And one of the questions asked, like, what are the most important things that need to happen? And the number one answer right now is infrastructure. So I think people are pretty realistic about, yes, we want all of those other things. We want parks, we want things to do, but at the same time, infrastructure is critical, and it's kind of where we're at step one, and let's work on that as well. So just kind of fodder for the group as we start to close our thoughts. And I think I'll close up the survey in a minute, but quality of life. So strong and improving, 70%. And then sprinkle through the other categories. And I think everybody has a little bit of their own reason for why they think things are going in a certain direction. But I think just the fact that everyone's here tonight is on the improving side, right? Like the more we have these conversations, I think a lot of really good work came out of it related to a number of the conversations that we've had in our individual boards, and so then to bring it kind of together and discuss as a whole. So I think with that, Jennifer, Jeff, any thoughts?
Jennifer and I were just talking. I think one of the other things we're going to look at as well is we're going to look at what do aging generations right now really want. Do they want the communities on the outskirts, the single-family homes with the yards where you've got maintenance and you've got things that you need to take care of? I don't know, in my opinion, that's what most of the aging generation wants right now. But we're going to look into that. Why is that important? As part of the work that we're doing with the downtown master plan, when we talk about densities in the downtown, where you're centralized and focused with the infrastructure that you have current in your downtown core area, there may be a market to really tap into there. Those utility connections, the density that you can bring there, might help address some of these capital cost questions. What happens in the outskirts and the LPRP over time, there may be a market at some point when that one developer comes in, the Newland Homes community with the national builder who says, we know there's a market to hit this, We're going to put it in. It's feasible for us to do it because we know we're going to get the return on our investment. That may happen over time. And to Pam's point, the size of the LPRP, it's very large, right? But it is an area that has the concepts, it has the guidelines, it has those opportunities for the town to shape the way that the town wants to see things happen if something is going to come in at some point. If it's outside of the LPRP and it comes in and it's in the county, it's going to happen anyway. The town now has the potential to have it within its growth area and have some control over that. So just a point to be made that the LPRP, you all do have some teeth in the game, skin in the game, if you will, with the size that it is. But I think something we want to really look at is some of those demographics, look at some of those studies. What is the market really driving right now? I know my folks, as they're getting older, my mom wants to live in the resort lifestyle. She does not want to have to mow a lawn. She wants to be able to access services easily. She wants to be able to walk to things. I think that there's a growing market for that. I think as part of the downtown and the core, when we think of the town, there could be some incentivized focus on that. That might help drive some of the immediate concerns. When I say immediate, over the next 10, 20, 30 years as folks are starting to age, and then we've got the next generation coming up. But what happens on the outskirts is going to eventually start to happen, and these other conversations definitely need to be had when we look at density. What is the feasibility? 2 units, 3 units an acre? I mean, you're not going to get the return on that, and most developers are going to say it's not really worth our time. The bite at the apple is not worth it to do that. So that is definitely something that needs to be looked at. But I think we can offset some of this as well if we really try to look at the market. What do people really want? Do they really want to live out on the outskirts? We want to live in that small town, that lifestyle, everything that Lake Placid provides. We don't necessarily want to be on top of each other. We like the rural feel, but do we need to be way out in the hinterland? If I need to get into a service or a doctor's appointment or something, I'm farther out now, right? I'd like to have all of that kind of at a stone throw's distance from me. So these are all, again, as I said before, they're all parts of the puzzle. They all work together, but these are some additional things that we'll look at as well. But with that, I think this has been really good. Are there any other topics just generally that we could add to the parking lot that we didn't maybe bring up today that you've thought about as we've gone through this, or just any other general questions that you guys have right now?
Before we leave tonight, and we thank you for your patience tonight, as you look around the other communities surrounding us, are there any aspects of those cities, for example, that we don't have in Lake Placid that you would like to see?
I like to bring an industrial area like Sebring has the Sebring Airport. They have a lot of different higher paid tax base and jobs and opportunities, higher paid wages. They have the Duke Energy Readiness Study around the town hall area, but it's different landowners, and there's no, you've had it for 4 years, and it's got a
And kind of just pulling off what you just said, right now, the highest density in the town, and Dana can check me on that, is 12 units an acre. In the greater area,
But it's in the downtown historic area, and I've looked at what parcels that is, that it can apply to, the clustering and the 12 units, and it's very limited.
so as a comparison, the city of Sebring, the highest density is 40 units an acre as a comparison. And in Avon Park, they just adopted 40. There'll be 40 as well. Yeah, they were 16 and now they're going up to 40. But as we work on the downtown master plan, and thank you for highlighting that, we'll provide a comparison to surrounding areas. We are seeing a desire for higher densities in downtowns. Lake Wauchula doesn't necessarily have the higher density, but they definitely have now the growing demand for residential over retail in their core downtown, which adds life and greater visibility. One of the great, I guess, perceptions of a safe community is you see somebody walking their dog after dark or folks going through a stroll. And I think we see that here, but it's also a great market for taking advantage of what we have now. But through the codes you have a lot of assets in there that help preserve your character. But it is that directed decision on looking at those higher densities, utilities and where they go, and really that overall master planning. So yeah, thank you for that. And I apologize, the chart there on that is the legend. Those are the land uses and what is allowed in those categories. But you can see on the map, as Ms. Ventress said, there are not a whole lot of areas, but that's also part of the conversation. Do we look at possibly an overlay with greater densities or look at greater opportunities?
That purple area on the map, that's a solar farm, and look at the map, interactive map of the Holmes County, because it's a little deceiving, because there's a purple and then we slide out the purple, but that's the majority of the solar farm in Town Hall, but it's not the density you think. And on Lake June, that whole strip, it's 2 units per acre. It's a peak, Lake Placid regional plan, it's a plan development, and it says mixed use, but it means something completely different in our town versus other places.
I think too that what we should do, I mean, we're past 7:30 now. I don't know how many people plan to actually leave at 7:30, but maybe use your site. If you could set something up, I mean, if people knew when they wrote in, you would get tons of information if they really thought they were going to be heard, and that you would take that information, and I know you do, and then people just need to get it. They need to, and I need to write you too because I haven't been, and that's my bad. So I have lots of ideas now. I'm going to send them to you. So anyway, but if we can encourage the public to use their sites, and I just, I mean, I don't know if you're done yet, but I just appreciate everybody coming tonight. It's not easy to do one more thing in our busy lives and that sort of thing, and our staff came and you all came, and I think it's been great. So I didn't know how much more you have to go over.
I think that wraps it up. Mary Beth gave it to me to wrap up, and I think I threw out a few more questions there, but I think just kind of leaving you with that, and if anybody has anything else, closing comments. Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank you guys, Central Florida Regional Planning Council. Is there anything else anybody has to add?
Could I trouble y'all for a picture up here as soon as we're done with all of our board members just right here?
Oh, that'd be great.
Council.
If you all don't mind just a few more minutes and get your photo taken up here with us. Thank you. I'll adjourn the meeting at 7:37.